To no one's surprise, the Keystone XL pipeline leaked 210,000 gallons of oil, and just days after this happened, public officials in Nebraska voted to approve construction of the same pipeline that just leaked in their state. So they saw the massive oil spill and they said, sign me up for that. Now, this was a decision that was made by Nebraska's Public Service Commission, and if you feel inclined to protest after they voted to approve construction of a pipeline that is leaking, first of all, your heart is in the right place, but unfortunately, what they're trying to do to prevent protests might be more of a scandal than them approving of this pipeline in the first place. So according to Eileen Brown of The Intercept, she reports Nebraska's Public Service Commission approved the Keystone XL pipeline Monday, eliminating a major regulatory hurdle to construction of a project that galvanized people across the United States into opposition. The decision comes days after the existing Keystone pipeline, to which the KXL will connect, spilled an estimated 210,000 gallons of oil onto agricultural land in South Dakota. To many pipeline opponents, motivated by the inevitability of a spill, the contaminated land proves their point. Meanwhile, organizers are preparing to stand in the way of construction. A coalition, including several tribes, native-led organizations, and environmental nonprofits, released a call to action, asking people to sign up to commit to creative, peaceful resistance along the pipeline route when construction begins on KXL, likely next spring. The statement asserts that anyone traveling to resist must undergo a training and remain peaceful. Last month, 84 members of Congress, including 4 Democrats from Texas, signed a letter to Attorney General Jeff Sessions asking whether domestic terrorism laws could be used to prosecute individuals shutting down oil pipelines. In response to queries about the letter, the Department of Justice told Reuters earlier this month that it would aggressively prosecute anyone who damages critical energy infrastructure in violation of federal law. In anticipation of the Keystone XL's construction, legislation was passed in South Dakota in March that allows the governor or a local sheriff to prohibit groups numbering more than 20 from gathering on public land or in schools, and also allows the Department of Transportation to limit access to highways by prohibiting stopping or parking in designated areas. Now let me remind you that we supposedly live in a democracy. But if you protest the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline, 84 lawmakers are going to try to prosecute you as a terrorist. These are the same types of tactics that we saw Egypt use during the Arab Spring. They tried to prohibit people from protesting by saying, well, if you gather in groups of 10 people or more, then that's illegal. And that's what they're doing here. They're saying if we see people in groups of 20 or more, then we have the authority to prosecute you as if you were committing terrorism. Now, what act of terror are these people committing? The definition of terrorism is violence as a means of promoting a political cause or violence for political aims. But they're not committing any acts of violence whatsoever. They're peaceful. And this was the same thing with the Dakota Access Pipeline protesters at Standing Rock. They were peaceful, and yet they were shot with tear gas, rubber bullets. They were shot with cold water and freezing cold weather. There were literally armed mercenaries that were hired, and they were using counter-terrorism tactics against these peaceful protesters. They were attacked by guard dogs of armed mercenaries. This is the resistance that we see, not just from private companies, but our own elected officials. If we stand up and we say, we don't support what you're doing, we don't support the construction of these pipelines that will inevitably leak and could potentially damage the environment and kill wildlife. I mean, to say that we're going to do something anyway, that's undemocratic. But to say that we're going to punish people who protest what we're doing when we violate the will of the people, that's just authoritarianism. There's no way to frame it any other way. This is authoritarianism. We are seeing democracy slip from our hands here. I don't see how stories like this aren't national scandals. The United States, not just a democratic country, but the beacon of democracy across the world. This is what we claim, right? We're using authoritarian tactics, counter-terrorist tactics against pipeline protesters. And again, they approved this pipeline, the construction of this pipeline in their state, after it spilled more than 200,000 gallons of oil. We no longer live in a democracy. And this isn't just me being hyperbolic and saying that. This is based on the data. A Princeton University study published in 2014 by Dr. Gillens and Page actually found that normal citizens have a statistically non-significant impact on policy outcomes, whereas the elites and special interests, i.e. multinational corporations, and private interests, they have all the say on policy outcomes. So if you don't want something to happen, if you don't want your public officials to side with corporations who destroy the planet because they want to make profits, too bad. Unless you have enough money to buy politicians yourself, they're not going to listen to you. And this corruption is rampant. It's not just at the national level, but as we see, it's at the local level as well. Because how else could you vote to approve a pipeline after it just spilled, unless you're corrupt? This is a national scandal. I don't see how this isn't talked about in the mainstream media all the time.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.